with you live. Bob Chapman with us, the internationalforecaster.com. So, Bob, what do you think, man? Are we going to see a massive amount of small to medium banks go under?
Yeah, we are. There's a banker who attends the Federal Reserve meetings. I know him quite well. And he told me their list is not 780 or whatever that number is. It's 2,055 banks that are near extinction. And if 1,000 banks went under, it would cost $500 billion. And the FDIC has $92 billion after having received 3 months' dues from banks ahead of time. So there's no more money coming in.
And the only way the banks had money ahead of time to pay is because they got money from the Treasury in the first place in the bailout, right?
Well, actually, the money from the bailout was owed to them because the money goes into the general fund when it comes in from the banks. So they have $92 billion, plus they have, which they have not used, a $500 billion line of credit. Well, if 1,000 banks go under from here on out, which is very, very doable, say, over the next year and a half to 2 years, and at least 500 could go out under this year. Well, if you cut that in half from 500, you get 250 billion, and they've got, let's say, 100 billion in round figures. That would mean they'd have to borrow $150 billion from the federal government. And the federal government's not going to do that because they know there's more behind that, because they know the true status of the banks. So they know that they're going to be on the hook for at least $500 billion, and it may be as much as $1 trillion if 2,000 banks go under, which I think eventually will.
The numbers just
and what's going to expedite that, Sam, is the meeting that they're going to have sometime between October of this year and the end of next year.
Is it a G20 meeting?
Yes.
Because they're starting to have those.
There'll be a lot more people there than G20 because the meeting will have to include every country revaluing and devaluing. The experts will figure that out, the numbers crunchers. And then there will be a multilateral debt settlement, probably for 30 cents on the dollar. And then everybody will domestically devalue their currencies. In the meantime, the dollar will no longer be the world's reserve currency. They'll create a G20 type of international trading unit, not a currency, a trading unit. And it'll be done through an index which will be weighted by each country dependent upon their financial condition. And that's what they're going to do. And nobody else has come out with this except me because they can't think that far ahead.
They used to have these G20 meetings, annually or every couple of years? Now they're starting to have them like every 6 months or 3 months.
Right. And the situation's getting worse and worse. And, Greece was just a warning shot across the bow. I mean, they could have taken Greece down 10 years ago. I mean, they've never been solvent, and neither has Italy. And Italy's supposed to have gold, but what they did is they leased most of it out. And we know that, even though they're lying about it. I mean, people say, well, let's let the Germans back their currency with gold. Well, how about the German gold is sitting in Fort Knox that the U.S. government won't or can't give back to Germany? Good question.
Yeah,
and why won't they give it back? Is it because they sold it?
Yes.
I think so.
Yes, it's because they shipped it out and they don't have it. All right,
That's
now,
right.
How the deleveraging is going to happen, all this unwinding is going to take place. The problem is, and the tricky part is, how they're going to do it. Every time we think they're going to do something, they kind of change their minds and do it slightly differently. Do you think it'll be whole states imploding?
Right. There's 16. If you read in this issue that just came out, and I'll name them off here, the U.S. and England, and then we'll go to the pigs, as they're called, which is Portugal, Ireland, Italy, Spain, Greece. And then we have Argentina to throw in for good measure. And then we move over to the Ukraine. Kazakhstan is in serious trouble. And then we have those that are really already in trouble: Iceland, Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, Hungary, Romania, Poland, and maybe even Denmark. I mean, they're all on the edge. Some of them are already bankrupt, like the United States and Greece and the state of California, which we'll call it another country because it's the biggest country size and the seventh biggest in the world, so you can throw that in. That'll give you 17. I mean, it's dreadful, the situation, but it's been that way for 2.5 years. If they had met this problem head on, which they don't want it because they want world government, it could have been solved by now. But that's not what they're after here. They're after the total destruction of the economies and the finances of all nations in the world so they can force them under a one world government, as you said earlier in the program, and that's what it's all about.
That's exactly what they're doing. In fact, they're trying to raise the price of oil now. Oil's around $80 in an effort to continue to restrict the amount of movement of the citizenry as well.
That's true. I mean, if you look at the airlines, I don't know how they stay in business. And the fares have gone
catastrophic.
220, 250% higher. I mean, who can afford to travel, plus put up with all of the horrible things you have to put up with in going to an airport in the United States? In other countries, it's not quite as bad.
Yeah, you run around and just be virtually naked, huh?
Well, it's another method of depersonalizing people, turning them into numbers, ciphers.
And demoralizing them.
You know, over here to get deloused, over here so we can see your body, over here to look at everything in your belongings. People are not traveling, and they're not going to be unless they have to.
And that continually demoralizes the people. They want to break them down and then rebuild them into what they want, almost like the military has done.
That's right. They call it re-education process.
Yeah, that's what they're all about, man. The re-education process is in full swing in America. All right, I want to ask you about Mexico, because now they say that the Mexican government's picking sides and starting to pick certain drug cartels over another. And then now they say there's American troops embedded in Mexican armies. What do you say?
Untrue.
It's not true.
There is no American troops embedded with Mexican soldiers in Mexico. Now, there might be at the top directions coming from the U.S. military to the top rungs of the military in Mexico, but I don't even know of anything like that. I do know that the United States has given Mexico a lot of equipment and a lot of money to affect their war against the drug trade. But their war has been very unsuccessful, and a lot of innocent people have died because of it. In fact, there are people who are migrating in Mexico from areas, we'll call them hot areas, to other areas that are not like that. I mean, the violence generally occurs along the border and in Sinaloa and Guerrero and Michoacan and places like that. And that's where these people hold forth. And that's why the government goes after them. But if you go throughout the other 90% of Mexico, there's no problems whatsoever.
All right. What about the issue of what do you want to say? The drug cartels and the government picking a certain drug cartel over another and backing them to where now there's kind of no difference between the government, the police, and the drug cartel.
That's true. And that's what this is all about. And,
are they going to take Mexico down over this?
The people who control government want to control the drugs.
Yeah, that's
and it's the same in every country. And we have the CIA; they've got the federal government. I mean, look at Afghanistan. I've talked to personally men from the Marine Corps who were instructed to guard the poppy fields so nobody could destroy them in Afghanistan. And it is harvested, processed, and shipped to Albania and Georgia, and then transshipped to Europe. And Russia's furious about it because a lot of that heroin is reaching Russia, and they don't want it to be. And that's $300 billion a year.
No doubt government's involved with black op drug
that's a war worth fighting for.
Right. Okay.
This is nothing new. This has been going on for the years.
Oh, yes.
MI6 was involved in the drug trade in the 1930s. That's the British equivalent of the CIA.
Agreed.
And you can go all the way back to the British when they took over India, created the harvesting of drugs, and then they took over China and forced them to use drugs. And most of the people who transported those drugs from India to China were American privateers.
Do you think they'll use this to take down Mexico?
Now, and it was the Forrestal's and the Cabots and the Forbes and all of those New England families who ran the transport of the drug trade for the British in the early 1800s. And that's how their fortunes were made.
Yeah, the more you learn, that makes you sick. Do you think they'll try to use this to take down Mexico?
No. No, they'd rather have their cooperation than do that. And, Mexico hasn't had any conflict since the revolution. And the people are not going to stand for it. They'll stand for institutionalized corruption because you see it worldwide. But beyond that, they're not going to stand for it.
I sure pray you're right. All right, Bob Chapman, we're flat out of time, my friend. Come back soon.
I will. See you in 2 weeks, and thank you, everybody, for listening.
There he goes, Bob Chapman, theinternationalforecaster.com.